The snow fell like a whispered prayer across the Montana territory, and Elena Rose had lost her shoes somewhere between the river crossing and the ridge that overlooked Kelton. But she refused to stop walking because the man she loved was waiting at the old trapper's cabin on the far side of town, and nothing, not even the biting cold that turned her toes numb, would keep her from reaching him. It was December 1884, and the wind cut through the pines with a mournful howl that seemed to echo the desperation in Elena's heart. She was 20 years old, the daughter of a failed shopkeeper who had dragged his family west with promises of prosperity that never materialized. Her father, Thomas Rose, had died 3 months ago from pneumonia, leaving Elena and her mother Martha with nothing but debts and a crumbling building on the edge of Kelton that the bank would seize come January. Her mother had taken ill 2 weeks past, leaving Elena to care for her and search for any solution to their predicament. The solution had a name: Harrison Thorne. She had met him 6 months earlier when he rode into town with a herd of cattle, a cowboy working for the Anderson ranch that sprawled across the valley floor. He was 24, tall and lean with sun-darkened skin, and eyes the color of creek water after spring rain. He had walked into her father's shop looking for rope, and had stayed an extra hour just to talk with her about things that seemed to matter, about dreams and disappointments, and the way the mountains looked when the sunset painted them gold. After that first meeting, he had found reasons to come back. Sometimes he needed supplies. Sometimes he just happened to be riding past. Each time, their conversations grew longer, more intimate, until Elena found herself thinking about him during every waking moment and dreaming of him when she finally fell asleep. He had kissed her for the first time in late September, behind the shop where the cottonwood trees grew thick enough to hide them from prying eyes. His lips had been gentle at first, questioning, until she pressed closer and answered with a hunger that matched his own. After that kiss, everything had changed. They met in secret, away from town gossip and her father's disapproving gaze. Harrison had told her he was saving money, planning to buy his own piece of land where he could build something lasting. He had spoken of a future that included her, a cabin with a stone fireplace and enough room for a family, horses in the corral and crops in the field. When her father died, Harrison had attended the funeral and squeezed her hand with a promise in his eyes. When her mother fell ill and the debts mounted, he had offered to help, but pride had kept Elena from accepting. She was stubborn, her mother always said, stubborn as a mule and twice as determined. But tonight, pride meant nothing. Tonight she needed him. The message had come that afternoon, delivered by a boy from the Anderson ranch. Harrison was staying at the old trapper's cabin for 3 days while he rounded up strays that had wandered into the high country. If she could meet him there, they could finally talk about their future without interruption, without the eyes of the town watching and judging. The message had been clear: come tonight if you can. Elena had left after dark, waiting until her mother fell into a fitful sleep before slipping out into the winter night. She had worn her only good dress beneath her coat, had put on the leather shoes that were already falling apart at the seams. The journey should have taken 2 hours on foot, following the road that curved around the base of the mountain before climbing toward the cabin. But she had chosen a shortcut, a path through the forest that would save time even if it meant navigating rough terrain in darkness. She had lost her footing at the creek, where ice made the stones treacherous. One moment she was stepping carefully across, the next she was falling, her shoes swept away by the current as she scrambled to keep from being pulled under. The water was so cold it felt like knives cutting into her skin. She had dragged herself out, gasping and shaking, and stood on the bank trying to decide whether to go back or push forward. The cabin was closer than home. Harrison was waiting. She pushed forward. Her feet had gone numb within the first mile, the cold seeping up through her legs until her whole body trembled with it. The snow fell harder, thick flakes that clung to her hair and eyelashes and made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. She followed the path by memory and instinct, climbing steadily upward as the trees thinned and the wind grew stronger. By the time she saw the dim glow of lamplight through the cabin windows, she could barely feel her legs. Each step was an act of will, her body screaming for her to stop, to lie down, to give in to the cold that wanted to pull her under. But she kept walking because Harrison was there, because his warmth and strength were just beyond that door, because she loved him with a fierceness that defied logic and circumstance. She stumbled into the clearing around the cabin and nearly fell. Her dress was frozen stiff below the knee, her coat offering little protection against the wind. She could see the cabin clearly now, solid and real, smoke curling from the chimney. She took another step, then another. The door opened before she reached it. Harrison must have heard something, some sound that carried over the wind. He stood framed in the doorway, backlit by the fire inside, and for a moment he just stared at her as if she were an apparition. Then he was moving, crossing the distance between them in long strides. His eyes went wide as he took in her condition, her ice-crusted clothing, the way she swayed on her feet. His gaze dropped to her bare feet, red and raw against the white snow, and something fierce and protective flashed across his face. "Elena," he said, his voice rough with shock and something deeper. "What happened? Where are your shoes?" She tried to answer, but her teeth were chattering too hard to form words. She reached for him instead, her hand shaking, and he caught it in both of his. His warmth was startling, almost painful against her frozen skin. Without hesitation, Harrison knelt down in the snow before her. His hands went to her waist, steadying her as he looked up into her face. "Let me carry you," he said, and there was no question in his voice, only determination and tenderness that made her heart ache. She wanted to protest, to tell him she could walk the last few feet, but her strength had finally run out. She nodded, and he swept her up into his arms as easily as if she weighed nothing. His body was solid and warm, his coat smelling of leather and wood smoke. She pressed her face against his shoulder and felt tears slip down her frozen cheeks. He carried her into the cabin and kicked the door shut behind them. The warmth inside was overwhelming after the bitter cold. He set her down gently in a chair near the fireplace, then immediately began stripping off her frozen coat. His movements were efficient but careful, his jaw set with concentration. "We need to warm you slowly," he said, talking more to himself than to her. "Too fast and it will hurt worse." He had blankets stored in a trunk against the wall. He pulled them out and wrapped them around her shoulders, then knelt before her again to examine her feet. His hands were gentle as they touched her frozen toes, and she winced at even that light contact. "I am going to make some warm water," he told her, standing and moving to the pot that hung over the fire. "Not hot, just warm. We will soak your feet and get the circulation back." Elena watched him work, still unable to speak through her chattering teeth. He moved with purpose, this cowboy who spent his days chasing cattle and mending fences. There was such competence in everything he did, such quiet strength. She had known he was capable, but seeing him like this, caring for her with such focused attention, made her love him even more. He returned with a basin of water, testing the temperature with his elbow before placing it before her. "This might hurt," he warned, then carefully lifted her feet and lowered them into the water. Pain shot through her, sharp and burning. She gasped and gripped the arms of the chair. Harrison's hand found hers immediately, his fingers lacing through hers and holding tight. "I know," he said softly. "I know it hurts, but you have to let the warmth come back. Just hold on to me." She held on, squeezing his hand as sensation returned to her feet in waves of agony. He never flinched, never pulled away, just kept his hand steady in hers and murmured reassurances that slowly penetrated the fog of pain. Eventually, the worst of it passed. Her feet were still sore, but the burning had subsided to a dull ache. Her teeth had stopped chattering, and with the blankets wrapped around her and the fire blazing nearby, warmth was finally seeping back into her bones. Harrison sat back on his heels, studying her face. "What happened?" he asked again. "Why did you come here like this? Where are your shoes?" "I lost them," she said, her voice hoarse. "At the creek crossing. I slipped on the ice." His expression darkened. "You walked all the way here through the snow without shoes." "I had to see you," she said simply. "Your message said tonight. I thought if I took the forest path, it would be faster, but I did not count on the ice." She paused, looking down at her hands. "My mother is getting worse. The doctor says she needs medicine we cannot afford. The bank is going to take the shop. I did not know what else to do. I needed to talk to you." Harrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood and pulled another chair close to hers, sitting so they were knee to knee. He took both her hands in his. "Elena, I would have come to you. You did not need to risk yourself like this. You were up here working. I could not ask you to leave." "You can always ask me," he said firmly. "Always. There is nothing more important to me than you." The words settled around her heart like a warm embrace. She looked into his eyes and saw the truth there, the depth of feeling he did not bother to hide. "I have been thinking," he continued, his thumbs rubbing gentle circles on the backs of her hands. "Ever since your father died, I have been trying to figure out how to help you without insulting your pride. But tonight, seeing you walk through the snow to reach me, I realize I have been a coward. I should have said this months ago." He stood, still holding her hands, and pulled her gently to her feet. She swayed slightly, and he steadied her, his hands moving to her waist. "Marry me," he said. "Not someday when I have saved enough money or when the timing is better. Marry me now, tomorrow. As soon as we can find a preacher." Elena's breath caught. "Harrison, I cannot ask you to take on my mother's care, my father's debts. You are not asking, I am offering. More than offering, I am begging." His hands tightened on her waist. "I love you, Elena. I have loved you since the day you argued with me about the price of rope and made me laugh for the first time in months. I love the way you hold your head high even when everything is falling apart. I love your stubbornness and your courage and the way you look at me like I am something more than just another ranch hand." "You are more," she whispered. "You are everything. Then say yes. Let me take care of you and your mother. Let me help you keep the shop or sell it or burn it down if that is what you want. Just say yes and make me the happiest man in Montana." Elena felt tears spilling down her cheeks again, but these were different from the ones she had shed in the cold. These were tears of relief and joy and overwhelming love. "Yes," she said. "Yes, I will marry you." Harrison pulled her close and kissed her, and it was nothing like their previous kisses behind the cottonwood trees. This was a promise, a claim, a beginning. His lips were warm and sure, and she melted into him, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him back with all the pent-up emotion of the terrible, wonderful night. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. "I am never letting you walk through the snow alone again," he murmured. "From now on, wherever you go, I go. Even to the shop when I need to inventory the thread, especially then. I am very good at counting thread." She laughed, the sound surprising her. After weeks of worry and fear, laughter felt strange and wonderful. Harrison led her back to the chair and made her sit while he checked her feet again. The color was returning to normal, though they were bruised and battered from her journey. He found a tin of salve in his pack and rubbed it gently into her skin, then wrapped her feet in clean cloth. "You will stay here tonight," he said, in a tone that brooked no argument. "I will ride down to town at first light and fetch the doctor for your mother. Then I will find the preacher and arrange for the wedding." "Where will you sleep?" Elena asked, looking around the small cabin. There was only one bed, narrow and covered with thick blankets, on the floor by the fire. "I will be comfortable enough, Harrison." "Elena." He met her gaze steadily. "You will take the bed. This is not negotiable." She wanted to argue, but exhaustion was catching up with her now that the crisis had passed. The warmth of the cabin, the relief of having made her decision, the security of knowing Harrison would take care of everything. It all combined to make her eyelids heavy. He must have seen it in her face because he scooped her up again and carried her to the bed. He set her down gently and pulled the blankets up to her chin. "Sleep," he said softly. "Everything will be better in the morning." She caught his hand before he could move away. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything, for being exactly who you are." He bent and kissed her forehead. "Sleep, my love." She drifted off with his hand still holding hers, the fire crackling in the hearth and the snow falling softly outside. For the first time in months she felt safe. Elena woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. Morning light streamed through the cabin's single window, bright and cheerful. She sat up slowly, testing her feet. They were sore, but the pain was manageable. The cloth wrappings had come loose during the night, and she carefully unwound them to examine the damage. Her feet were bruised and tender, with a few small cuts that had scabbed over, but nothing looked seriously injured. Harrison turned from the fireplace where he was cooking. "How do you feel?" "Better," she said honestly. "Sore, but better." He brought her a plate of bacon and hardtack, along with a cup of hot coffee. She ate hungrily, realizing she had not had a proper meal since yesterday morning. While she ate, Harrison packed his saddlebags with efficient movements. "I will ride fast," he said. "I should be back in town within the hour. I will send the doctor to your mother immediately, then start making arrangements for the wedding. Do you want me to tell your mother, or would you rather do that yourself?" "Tell her," Elena said. "She has been urging me to accept your help for weeks." "She will be relieved. And happy, I hope." "Very happy. She likes you." He grinned, and the expression transformed his usually serious face into something boyish and bright. "I like her too. She has good taste in daughters." After he left, Elena tidied the cabin as best she could with her sore feet. She found one of Harrison's clean shirts and put it on over her dress, which was still damp in places. His shirt hung to her knees and smelled like him, like leather and sage and something indefinably masculine. She rolled up the sleeves and went about washing the breakfast dishes and feeding more wood to the fire. The cabin was simply furnished, but well maintained. A table and 2 chairs occupied the center of the room. The bed was pushed against one wall, a trunk at its foot. Hooks on the wall held extra clothing and tack. A shelf above the fireplace displayed a few personal items. A photograph of an older couple who must be Harrison's parents, a pocket knife with an engraved handle, a harmonica, a small leather-bound book. Elena picked up the book carefully and opened it. Inside, in neat handwriting, Harrison had recorded his thoughts and observations. She felt guilty for prying but could not help reading a few lines. June 15, 1884. Met a girl today who argues about rope prices like her life depends on it. She has eyes the color of honey and a smile that makes me forget why I was upset about anything. Thomas Rose's daughter, Elena. I made an excuse to stay longer just to hear her talk. Elena's heart squeezed. She flipped forward, finding more entries. July 2. Rode into town again. Bought nails I do not need. Worth it to see Elena smile when I walked through the door. She told me about wanting to see San Francisco someday. I want to be the one to take her there. September 28. kissed her today. Nothing will ever be the same. I am going to marry this woman or die trying. She closed the book carefully and set it back on the shelf, her eyes stinging with happy tears. How had she gotten so lucky? In the midst of loss and hardship, she had found this man who loved her with such quiet intensity. The door opened and Harrison strode in, stamping snow from his boots. "I did not expect you back so soon," Elena said. "I rode hard." He crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. "The doctor was just starting his rounds. I caught him before he left and sent him straight to your mother. He promised to do everything he could." "Thank you." "I found Preacher Martin at the church. He can perform the ceremony tomorrow afternoon if that suits you. I know it is quick, but given your mother's condition." "Tomorrow is perfect," Elena assured him. "What about witnesses? We need witnesses." "I asked Mrs. Patterson from the general store and Tom Anderson from the ranch. They both said yes." He paused. "I also stopped by the bank." Elena stiffened. "The bank? I spoke with Mr. Hollies. I paid off your father's debts." "Harrison, no, that was not your responsibility." "You are my responsibility now, you and everything that concerns you." His voice was gentle but firm. "The shop is yours free and clear. You can keep it or sell it, whatever you want, but you will not lose it to the bank." Elena did not know what to say. The relief was overwhelming, but so was the guilt. "How much did it cost you?" "All the money I had saved." He said it simply, without regret. "I was saving it to buy land, but this is more important. We will save again, together this time." She pressed her face against his chest and felt his arms come around her, strong and sure. "I do not deserve you," she whispered. "You deserve everything good in this world, and I intend to spend my life making sure you get it." They spent the rest of that day in the cabin, talking about their future. Harrison told her about his plans to keep working for Anderson while they saved money. The ranch owner had offered him a foreman position that would come with better pay and a small house on the property. They could live there while they figured out their next steps. Elena told him about her mother's illness, how the doctor had said it was consumption, and that the mountain air might help if they could get her somewhere warm and dry for the winter. Harrison listened carefully and promised they would find a solution. As evening approached, Harrison reluctantly said he needed to return to town. "I want to check on your mother myself and make sure everything is arranged for tomorrow. You should stay here where it is warm and your feet can heal." "I cannot miss my own wedding preparations." "You can and you will. Your feet are not ready for another trek through the snow." He knelt before her again, examining the bandages he had changed that afternoon. "I will come back for you in the morning with a wagon. We will ride into town together in style." She wanted to argue, but the stubborn set of his jaw told her it would be pointless. Besides, her feet did hurt quite a lot, and the thought of another walk through the cold made her shudder. "All right," she agreed, "but you come back early. I do not want to be late to my own wedding. I will be here before dawn." He kissed her long and slow, then forced himself to pull away. "Stay warm, eat the stew I left in the pot, and Elena." "Yes, I love you. I love you too." After he left, Elena sat by the fire and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 24 hours. Yesterday morning, she had been desperate and alone, carrying the weight of her family's troubles on her shoulders. Now she was engaged to be married, her debts were paid, and hope had returned like the sun breaking through storm clouds. She touched her lips, still tingling from Harrison's kiss, and smiled into the firelight. The next morning, Elena woke to the sound of wagon wheels outside. She had slept deeply, her body finally recovering from the ordeal of 2 nights ago. She dressed quickly in her now dry dress and was trying to tame her hair when Harrison knocked and entered. He had brought fresh clothes for her, borrowed from Mrs. Patterson. a simple but pretty dress in dark blue wool, with a clean white collar and matching blue ribbon for her hair. He also had proper shoes, worn but serviceable. "Mrs. Patterson said to tell you these were her wedding dress and shoes," Harrison explained. "She wanted you to have something special to wear." Elena held the dress against herself, touched by the gesture. "That is so kind of her. Everyone in town wants to help once they heard about the wedding. Mrs. Patterson insisted on making a cake. Tom Anderson is bringing flowers from his wife's hothouse. Even Mr. Hollies from the bank sent his congratulations." "How is my mother?" Harrison's expression grew serious. "The doctor gave her medicine that helped her breathe easier. She was sitting up when I visited last night, and she made me promise to take good care of you. She is looking forward to the wedding." Relief flooded through Elena. "Can she attend?" "The doctor thinks it would be too much for her. But he agreed she could sit by the window, and we arranged for the ceremony to take place in the church where she will be able to see from her room across the street." It was not perfect, but it was thoughtful and kind. Elena felt fresh tears threaten. "You have thought of everything." "I am trying to." He looked suddenly uncertain, this confident cowboy who could rope a steer and break a horse without breaking a sweat. "I want this day to be special for you. I know it is not the big fancy wedding you probably dreamed about. Harrison Thorne, look at me." She waited until his eyes met hers. "I do not care about fancy. I care about marrying the man I love. Everything else is just decoration." His smile was like sunrise. "Get dressed, then. We have a wedding to get to." The ride into Kelton was beautiful despite the cold. The sun shone bright on the snow-covered landscape, making everything sparkle. Harrison had filled the wagon bed with blankets and heated stones, and Elena was wrapped up warm and comfortable beside him on the driver's bench. Her feet, protected by thick socks and Mrs. Patterson's shoes, barely hurt at all. They talked and laughed during the journey, Harrison telling her stories about his childhood in Colorado and his decision to become a cowboy. Elena shared memories of her father in happier times, before the business failed and worry carved lines into his face. The conversation was easy and natural, the comfortable talk of two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. As they neared town, Elena grew nervous. "What if I trip walking down the aisle? What if I say something foolish during the vows? Then I will catch you, and we will laugh about it for the next 50 years. Harrison reached over and squeezed her hand. "Nothing can go wrong today because at the end of it, we will be married. That is the only thing that matters." The church was already filling with people when they arrived. It seemed half the town had decided to attend. Harrison helped Elena down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist. "I need to go around to the front entrance. Mrs. Patterson will help you get ready." Mrs. Patterson materialized like a benevolent whirlwind, ushering Elena into a small room off the church vestibule. She fussed over Elena's dress and hair, pinning the blue ribbon just so and tucking a small bouquet of hothouse roses into her hands. "You look beautiful, dear," Mrs. Patterson said, her eyes bright with tears. "Harrison is a lucky man." "I am the lucky one," Elena said softly. "You are both lucky, which is exactly how it should be." Mrs. Patterson patted her cheek. "Your mother asked me to give you this." She pressed a small object into Elena's hand. It was her mother's wedding ring, a simple gold band that had belonged to Elena's grandmother before that. Elena's throat closed with emotion. "She said every bride should have something old," Mrs. Patterson explained. "She wanted you to wear it today." Elena slipped the ring onto her right hand, since the left was reserved for the ring Harrison would give her. She looked at her reflection in the small mirror on the wall and barely recognized herself. Her cheeks were flushed with happiness, her eyes bright. She looked like a woman in love, which she supposed she was, Organ music swelled from the sanctuary. "That is your cue," Mrs. Patterson said. "Ready?" Elena took a deep breath. "Ready." The walk down the aisle was a blur of faces and smiles. Elena was aware of people watching, of the organ playing something traditional and lovely, of flowers decorating the pews. But her focus was on the man waiting at the altar. Harrison stood tall and straight in his best clothes, a dark suit that made his shoulders look even broader. His hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaven. But what struck her most was the expression in his eyes as he watched her approach. He looked at her like she was something precious and miraculous, like he could not quite believe his good fortune. When she reached the altar, he took her hands and whispered, "You are beautiful." Preacher Martin began the ceremony. Elena tried to pay attention to the words, but she was too focused on Harrison, on the way his thumbs rubbed gentle circles on her hands, on the slight tremor she felt in his fingers that told her he was as nervous and excited as she was. When it came time for the vows, Harrison's voice was clear and strong. "I, Harrison James Thorne, take you, Elena Rose, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to love you, protect you, and stand beside you through whatever life brings. I promise to be faithful and true, to make you laugh when you are sad, and to carry you through the snow whenever you need me." The last part was not traditional, and a ripple of laughter went through the congregation. Elena felt tears spill down her cheeks as she made her own vows, her voice shaking with emotion. "I, Elena Rose, take you, Harrison James Thorne, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to love you, support you, and build a life with you. I promise to be your partner in all things, to trust your strength even as I offer my own, and to walk beside you always, even if it means walking barefoot through snow." More laughter, warmer this time. Harrison's eyes were suspiciously bright as he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger. She did the same with the ring she had bought with the last of her personal savings, a matching band that looked right and perfect on his strong hand. "By the power vested in me by the territory of Montana," Preacher Martin intoned, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Harrison, you may kiss your bride." Harrison cupped her face in his hands and kissed her gently, reverently, as if sealing the most sacred of promises. The congregation erupted in applause, and when they broke apart, both were smiling through tears. They walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, husband and wife. Outside the church, people threw rice and called congratulations. Mrs. Patterson directed them to the church hall where she had set up a reception with cake and punch and sandwiches. But first, Elena needed to see her mother. Martha Rose was sitting by the window of their room above the shop, wrapped in blankets and propped up with pillows. She had watched the ceremony from across the street, and tears streaked her thin face as Elena and Harrison entered. "Mama," Elena said, rushing to her side and kneeling carefully. "How are you feeling? Better for seeing you married to such a good man." Martha reached out and touched Elena's cheek. "You looked so beautiful walking down that aisle. Your father would have been so proud." "I am wearing grandmother's ring," Elena said, holding up her right hand. "I know. I wanted you to have it, to remember that love can be strong enough to last generations." Martha turned her gaze to Harrison, who stood respectfully near the door. "Come here, son." Harrison approached and took Martha's offered hand. "Thank you for trusting me with her," he said simply. "Take care of my girl. Love her the way she deserves. Every day for the rest of my life," Harrison promised. They stayed for a few more minutes, but Martha was clearly tiring. Elena kissed her mother's forehead and promised to visit the next day, then allowed Harrison to lead her back to the reception. The celebration was small but joyful. People Elena had known all her life came to wish them well, to share stories and offer advice. Tom Anderson pulled Harrison aside to officially offer him the foreman position, which Harrison accepted with a handshake and a promise to start after a brief honeymoon. Mrs. Patterson cried happy tears while serving enormous slices of cake. Even Mr. Hollies from the bank stopped by to give them a small monetary gift and apologize for the troubles regarding the debt. As the afternoon faded toward evening, Harrison whispered in Elena's ear, "Ready to go home, home." Such a simple word, but it meant everything. Elena nodded. They said their goodbyes and climbed back into the wagon, which Harrison had loaded with gifts and well wishes. Instead of heading to the Anderson ranch house that would be their permanent home, Harrison turned the horses toward the mountain. "Where are we going?" Elena asked. "The cabin. I thought we could spend a few days there, just the two of us, before we settle into regular life." He glanced at her, suddenly uncertain. "Unless you would rather go straight to the ranch house, I should have asked." "The cabin is perfect," Elena said, snuggling closer to him on the bench. "Absolutely perfect." The cabin was warm when they arrived, the fire already laid and waiting to be lit. Harrison must have prepared it that morning before coming to fetch her. He carried her over the threshold, as was traditional, and set her gently on her feet inside. For a moment, they just stood there, looking at each other. The reality of their new situation seemed to settle over them both. They were married. This was their wedding night. They were alone together with no need to hide or sneak away or worry about propriety. Harrison cleared his throat. "I should light the fire." "Yes, good idea." He busied himself with the kindling while Elena explored the supplies he had brought. Fresh bread, cheese, dried meat, apples, coffee, flour, and beans. Enough for several days of simple but satisfying meals. Someone, probably Mrs. Patterson, had included a jar of preserves and another of honey. As the fire took hold and warmth began to fill the cabin, some of the nervousness faded. This was Harrison, Elena reminded herself. The man she loved, who she had spent countless hours talking with. The cowboy who knelt in the snow to care for her frozen feet. Her husband. She turned to find him watching her, and the heat in his gaze had nothing to do with the fire. "Come here," he said softly. She went to him, and he pulled her into his arms. This kiss was different from the one at the altar. It was deeper, more passionate, carrying the promise of the night ahead. His hands moved over her back, pulling her closer, and she responded with equal fervor, her fingers tangling in his hair. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Elena," Harrison said, his voice rough. "If you need time, if you are not ready, we can wait. I do not want to rush you." She touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw. "I am ready. I love you, Harrison. I want this. I want you." He kissed her again, and then he was leading her to the bed, their bed now, and everything else faded away except the two of them and the love they shared. Later, they lay tangled together under the blankets, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. Harrison held Elena close, her head resting on his chest, his fingers trailing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I knew was possible," she answered honestly. "This has been the strangest few days of my life. 2 nights ago I was walking through the snow, half frozen and desperate. Now I am married to the man I love, safe and warm and loved." "You will always be safe and warm and loved," Harrison promised. "I will make sure of it." They talked quietly about their plans. Harrison would start his new position as foreman in a week. Elena would continue to run the shop, at least for now, though they discussed the possibility of selling it if the right offer came along. Martha would live with them, of course, and they would find the best possible care for her consumption. "What if she does not get better?" Elena asked quietly, voicing the fear that haunted her. "Then we will make her as comfortable as possible and grateful for the time we have with her," Harrison said gently. but I believe she will improve. The doctor said the mountain air and good food would help, and she will have both." Elena pressed closer to him, grateful for his steady presence. "I want to give you children," she said suddenly. "Sons and daughters, a whole houseful if we are blessed." She felt Harrison smile against her hair. "I want that too, but there is no rush. We have all the time in the world." They drifted off to sleep wrapped around each other, warm and content. The next few days passed in a blissful haze. They spent their time talking, cooking simple meals together, making love, and simply enjoying each other's company without the pressures of the outside world. Harrison taught Elena to play the harmonica, and though she was terrible at it, they laughed until their sides hurt. Elena read aloud from a book of poetry she found among Harrison's things, and he listened with his head in her lap, his eyes closed in contentment. On the fourth day, they reluctantly packed up and headed down the mountain. Real life was waiting, and while the honeymoon had been wonderful, Elena was eager to see her mother and begin their new life together properly. The ranch house that came with Harrison's foreman position was small but well built, with 2 bedrooms, a main living area with a fireplace, and a separate kitchen. It sat about a quarter-mile from the main ranch house, close enough to be convenient but far enough to feel private. Previous foremen had lived there, and the furniture was basic but functional. They spent the next week making it a home. Harrison built additional shelves and a proper table for the kitchen. Elena sewed curtains for the windows and made the bedrooms comfortable. Martha moved into the smaller bedroom, and with regular meals and the doctor's medicine, she began to improve almost immediately. Her breathing became easier, and color returned to her pale cheeks. Harrison proved to be as good as his word in every respect. He worked hard at his new job, managing the ranch hands and cattle with quiet efficiency that earned respect even from men twice his age. He came home every evening to Elena, always greeting her with a kiss and asking about her day. He was patient and kind with Martha, often sitting with her in the evenings and listening to her stories about Elena's childhood. Elena continued to run the shop, but with Martha improving and Harrison bringing in a steady income, the pressure was off. She began to enjoy the work again, taking pleasure in helping customers and organizing inventory. She hired a local widow to help part-time, which gave her more freedom to focus on her home and husband. As winter gave way to spring, their life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Harrison would wake before dawn to start his work at the ranch. Elena would make breakfast and pack his lunch, then head to the shop. They would reunite in the evenings, sharing meals and conversation before falling into bed together, their passion for each other showing no signs of dimming. It was in early April that Elena began to suspect she might be pregnant. She missed her monthly courses, and her breasts felt tender. She was tired more easily, needing afternoon naps that she had never required before. At first, she did not want to say anything, worried about getting Harrison's hopes up too soon. But when another month passed and the signs continued, she knew it was time to tell him. She chose a Sunday afternoon when Harrison had the day off and Martha was napping. They sat together on the porch of their little house, watching the mountains in the distance and enjoying the warm spring air. "Harrison," Elena said, her heart pounding, "I have something to tell you." He turned to her, immediately attentive. "What is it?" "I think I am pregnant." For a moment he just stared at her. Then a grin spread across his face, wide and joyful and more unguarded than she had ever seen him. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing the doctor, but all the signs are there." He pulled her into his arms and held her tight, and when he pulled back, she saw tears in his eyes. "A baby," he said wonderingly. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy, Elena, I am beyond happy. I am ecstatic, terrified but ecstatic." He placed a hand gently on her still flat stomach. "A son or daughter, our child." "I hope I will be a good mother," Elena said softly. "You will be an amazing mother. Look at how you cared for your mother, how you managed the shop, how you have made this house a home. You are strong and capable and loving. Our child will be blessed to have you." They went to see the doctor the next day, and he confirmed what Elena already knew. She was indeed pregnant, about 3 months along by his estimation. The baby would arrive in early October. He pronounced her healthy and gave her instructions for proper care during pregnancy. Martha cried happy tears when they told her. "A grandchild," she said, clasping Elena's hands. "Oh, my darling girl, I am so glad I lived to see this day." "You will live to see many more days," Elena said firmly. "You are getting stronger every week. You will be here to meet your grandchild and watch them grow." And Martha did continue to improve. The mountain air, good food, and happiness of having her daughter settled and safe seemed to work miracles. By summer, she was well enough to help in the garden Elena had planted and even to visit the shop occasionally. Elena's pregnancy progressed normally. She continued working at the shop until the summer heat made it too uncomfortable, then transitioned to working from home on bookkeeping and inventory management. Her belly swelled with the growing life inside her, and Harrison was endlessly fascinated by it. He would place his hands on her stomach and feel the baby kick, his face filled with wonder. "What should we name them?" Harrison asked one evening as they lay in bed, his hand resting on her rounded belly. "If it is a boy, I would like to name him James, after your father," Elena said. She had learned that Harrison's parents had died in a fire when he was 18, leaving him alone in the world. He rarely spoke of them, but she knew he missed them terribly. Harrison's eyes grew bright with unshed tears. "That would mean a great deal to me, and if it is a girl—" "What was your mother's name?" "Catherine." "Then Catherine Rose Thorne," Elena said. "After your mother and my mother." "Perfect," Harrison whispered, bending to kiss her. "Absolutely perfect." The baby came in early October, right on schedule. Elena labored for 12 hours, with Martha and the doctor in attendance and Harrison pacing anxiously outside the bedroom. When the baby finally arrived, squalling and healthy, the doctor called Harrison in. "You have a son," he announced. Harrison approached the bed where Elena lay exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets. She pulled back the fabric to reveal a red, wrinkled face and a shock of dark hair. "James Harrison Thorne," Elena said softly. "Say hello to your papa." Harrison reached out with shaking hands and carefully took his son. The baby quieted immediately, seeming to recognize his father's touch. Harrison looked down at the tiny life he held and then at Elena, and tears streamed freely down his face. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking. "Thank you for this gift. Thank you for marrying me, for trusting me, for giving me a family. I love you so much, Elena." "I love you too," she whispered. "Thank you for being the man who knelt in the snow and carried me home. The first weeks with baby James were exhausting and wonderful. He was a good baby overall, healthy and strong, but he needed constant feeding and care." Harrison proved to be a devoted father, taking turns walking the floor with James when he fussed at night, changing diapers without complaint, and staring at his son with endless fascination. Martha was equally smitten with her grandson. She would sit for hours holding him, singing the same lullabies she had once sung to Elena. Her health had improved so much that she was able to be a real help, giving Elena breaks to rest and recover from childbirth. As the months passed and James grew, the little family settled into their new normal. Elena returned to work at the shop part-time, bringing James with her. Customers delighted in seeing the baby, and business actually improved with his presence. Harrison thrived in his position as foreman, and Tom Anderson had hinted at even greater responsibilities in the future. They celebrated James's first birthday with a small party at their house. Friends from town came, bringing gifts and good wishes. Martha had baked a cake, and James had made a mess of it, getting frosting all over his face and hands. Everyone laughed, and Harrison had carefully preserved the moment in his memory, knowing these were the days they would look back on fondly. That night, after the guests had left and James was asleep in his cradle, Harrison and Elena sat on their porch watching the sunset. Harrison had his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into his warmth. "You ever think about that night?" Elena asked. "When I walked through the snow to find you, all the time," Harrison admitted. "I remember seeing you standing there, half frozen, and feeling my heart stop. I remember kneeling in the snow and promising myself I would never let you suffer again. You have kept that promise. I intend to keep it for the rest of my life." He turned to her, his expression serious. "Are you happy, Elena? Truly happy? I know this life is not easy. I know we do not have much money, and you work hard both at home and at the shop." "I am happier than I ever dreamed possible," Elena said honestly. "I have you, I have James, I have my mother healthy and thriving. I have friends and purpose and love. What more could anyone want? More children?" Harrison suggested with a slight smile. Elena laughed. "Eventually. Let me recover from the first one before we start on the second." But in truth, she did want more children. She wanted to fill their house with laughter and noise, wanted to give James siblings to play with, wanted to watch Harrison be a father to many. And she knew in time that would happen. They had years ahead of them, years to build their family and their future. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, Elena reflected on the strange journey that had brought her to this moment. The hardship and loss, the desperate walk through the snow, the cowboy who knelt and said, "Let me carry you." It had all led here, to this porch, to this life, to this love. Time moved forward as it always does. James grew into a sturdy, curious toddler with his mother's honey-colored eyes and his father's serious nature. At 2 years old, he was already following Harrison around the ranch, mimicking everything his father did. Harrison had made him a small wooden horse on wheels, and James pulled it everywhere, chattering to it as if it were alive. Elena discovered she was pregnant again when James was 2.5. This pregnancy felt different from the first, more tiring somehow, and she wondered if it might be twins. But the doctor assured her it was a single baby, just a very active one. Harrison Rose Thorne arrived in the spring of James's 3rd year. She was smaller than her brother had been, more delicate, with a cap of blonde hair that surprised everyone. But she had a strong spirit that quickly made itself known. Even as an infant, she knew exactly what she wanted and how to get it, usually by unleashing a piercing wail that could wake the dead. Harrison was every bit as smitten with his daughter as he had been with his son. Elena often found him sitting in the rocking chair with Catherine in his arms, just staring at her in wonder. James was protective of his little sister, bringing her toys and patting her gently when she cried. Martha continued to thrive, defying all the doctor's original prognosis. She lived to see both her grandchildren born and spent her days helping care for them, telling them stories and teaching them songs. She never completely recovered from the consumption, but she managed it well, and her joy in her family seemed to give her strength. When Catherine was 6 months old, Harrison came home one evening with news. "Tom Anderson wants to retire," he said. "He is getting too old to manage the ranch effectively. He has offered to sell me a partnership. Not the whole ranch. He wants to keep it in his family for his sons eventually, but a significant stake." Enough that I would be making decisions alongside him, enough that our children would have real security. How much would it cost? Elena asked, her practical nature asserting itself. Everything we have saved plus a loan from the bank. Harrison looked uncertain. It is a risk. If something goes wrong, if the cattle market drops or we have a bad winter, we could lose everything. But if it succeeds, Elena prompted, then we would be building something lasting. Something we could pass to our children and their children after that. Elena thought about the shop, which had been doing well but required constant attention. She thought about their little house, which was growing cramped with 2 children. She thought about the life they could build if this opportunity worked out. Do it, she said firmly. Take the risk. I believe in you, Harrison. I trust your judgment. They took the partnership. It required long hours and hard work, even more than before. Harrison was up before dawn and rarely home before dark. Elena sold the shop to the widow she had hired, deciding to focus her energy on the ranch accounts and managing their household. Money was tight for the first year as they paid down the loan, but gradually things stabilized. By the time James was 6 and Catherine was 3, the ranch was prospering. They had expanded the herd, improved the grazing lands, and established new markets for their cattle. Harrison's reputation as an honest, hard-working rancher spread throughout the territory. The bank had been so impressed with their repayment schedule that they offered additional credit for further expansion. They built a new house, larger than the foreman's cottage but not ostentatiously so. It had 4 bedrooms, a proper dining room, and a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides. Elena planted flowers around the foundation and hung lace curtains in the windows. It looked like a home, solid and welcoming. Martha had her own room on the ground floor, decorated with her favorite things and positioned to catch the afternoon sun. She was in her 60s now, moving slower but still sharp of mind and quick to laugh. She spent her days with the grandchildren, teaching James to read and helping Catherine learn her letters. Elena discovered she was pregnant for a 3rd time when Catherine was 4. This pregnancy was easier than the previous 2, and she felt healthy and strong throughout. In the late summer of 1893, she gave birth to twin boys, Henry and Thomas. The twins were identical, with dark hair and gray eyes, and from the beginning they were inseparable. They did everything together, from learning to crawl to taking their first steps. James, now 7, took his role as big brother seriously, and Catherine, at 4, bossed all her brothers around with cheerful authority. The house was full of noise and laughter and occasional tears. Harrison had proven to be exactly the father Elena knew he would be. Patient, loving, firm when necessary, but always kind. He made time for each child individually, taking James out to check the cattle, teaching Catherine to ride her pony, playing with the twins on the floor even after a long day's work. On quiet evenings after the children were in bed, Harrison and Elena would sit together on their porch, much as they had in the early days of their marriage. They would talk about their day, make plans for the future, and simply enjoy each other's company. You ever regret it? Harrison asked one such evening. Giving up the shop, working so hard these past years, Elena looked at him in surprise. Regret it? Harrison, I have never regretted a single decision I made regarding you and our life together. Yes, it has been hard work, but look what we have built. 4 beautiful children, a successful ranch, a home filled with love. How could I regret any of that? I just want to make sure you are happy, Harrison said. I want you to have everything you deserve. I have you, Elena said simply. That is all I ever needed. Everything else is just blessing upon blessing. He pulled her close and kissed her, and even after 9 years of marriage, the spark between them remained as strong as ever. The years continued to pass. James grew tall and serious, taking after his father in temperament and work ethic. By the time he was 12, he was a real help on the ranch, capable of handling many tasks independently. He had a gift with horses, able to gentle even the most skittish animals with patience and kindness. Catherine was bright and spirited, quick to learn and quicker to laugh. She reminded Elena of herself at that age, full of dreams and determination. She declared her intention to go to college someday, unusual for a girl but not impossible. Elena and Harrison encouraged her ambitions, wanting all their children to have opportunities they had not had. The twins, Henry and Thomas, were 8 years old and still inseparable. They were more mischievous than their older siblings, always getting into some scrape or another, but their good hearts shone through. They adored their grandmother Martha, who had infinite patience for their antics. Martha lived to see all her grandchildren grow, defying everyone's expectations. She passed away peacefully in her sleep in the winter of 1895, surrounded by the family she loved. She was 68 years old and had lived to see her daughter happily married, established, and blessed with children. At her funeral, the church was packed with people whose lives she had touched. Elena grieved for her mother, but it was a gentle grief softened by gratitude. Martha had lived years beyond what the doctors predicted, had known happiness and peace in her final years, and had died without pain. It was as good an ending as anyone could hope for. Life continued its forward march. The ranch prospered under Harrison's management. Tom Anderson eventually retired completely, leaving Harrison in charge of operations. The original loan was paid off, and they were able to expand further, purchasing additional land and increasing their herd. They employed several ranch hands, treating them fairly and earning their loyalty. The Thorne Ranch, as it had come to be known, developed a reputation as a good place to work. Harrison never forgot his own days as a cowboy, and he made sure his workers had decent accommodations, fair wages, and respectful treatment. Elena found fulfillment in managing the household and the ranch's accounts. She had a good head for numbers and helped Harrison make strategic decisions about when to sell cattle and when to hold back. She also became active in the community, helping to establish a proper school in Kelton and organizing charitable efforts for families in need. Their children grew and thrived. James, at 16, was nearly as tall as his father and already talking about taking over ranch management someday. Catherine, at 13, had won a scholarship to a prestigious girls' academy in Helena and would be leaving home in the fall. The twins, at 12, were finally starting to develop distinct personalities. Henry was showing an interest in breeding and animal husbandry, while Thomas dreamed of becoming a veterinarian. One evening in the summer of 1897, Harrison and Elena celebrated their 13th wedding anniversary. The children had conspired with their father to give Elena the night off from cooking. Harrison had hired a cook from town to prepare a special meal, and the children served it with great ceremony. After dinner, Harrison presented Elena with a gift. It was a gold locket on a delicate chain. Inside were tiny photographs of each of their children. "So you can always carry them with you," Harrison explained, "even when Catherine goes away to school." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "It is perfect, thank you." Later, alone in their bedroom, Harrison pulled Elena into his arms. 13 years, he mused. Seems impossible that it has been that long, but also like it has always been this way. "I know what you mean," Elena said. "I can barely remember my life before you." "Do you ever think about that night?" Harrison asked. "When you walked through the snow?" It was a question they returned to occasionally, a touchstone in their relationship. "I think about it often," Elena admitted. "I think about how desperate I was, how frightened. I think about seeing you in that doorway and knowing I was finally safe. I think about you kneeling in the snow and saying, "Let me carry you." In many ways, you have been carrying me ever since. No, Harrison said firmly. We have been carrying each other. That is what marriage is, what partnership is. Sometimes I am stronger and carry you. Sometimes you are stronger and carry me, but we always move forward together. Together, Elena agreed, kissing him. Always together. As she settled into his arms that night, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. From that desperate walk through the snow to this moment of peace and prosperity, it had been quite a journey. There had been hardships along the way, certainly. There had been worries about money, about the children, about the ranch. There had been sleepless nights and difficult decisions. But through it all, there had been love. Constant, steady, unwavering love. The kind of love that sustained and supported, that made burdens lighter and joys brighter. The kind of love worth walking barefoot through the snow for. The years continued their steady progression. Catherine thrived at the academy in Helena, sending long letters home about her studies and new friends. She returned home for holidays and summers, bringing energy and new ideas with her. She talked about women's suffrage and education reform, ideas that sometimes shocked the more conservative residents of Kelton, but made Harrison proud of his daughter's intelligence and conviction. James took on more responsibility at the ranch, proving himself capable and mature beyond his years. At 18, he was essentially Harrison's right hand, managing crews and making decisions that affected the operation. He had also started courting a girl from town, the daughter of the general store owner, a sweet, practical young woman named Sarah who fit well into their family. The twins, now 15, had finally started to pursue separate interests. Henry worked primarily with the breeding program, developing an eye for strong bloodlines and good conformation. Thomas had apprenticed himself to the local veterinarian during summers, learning everything he could about animal medicine. The ranch continued to prosper. They had survived economic downturns and harsh winters, always managing to come out ahead through hard work and smart planning. The Thorne name was respected throughout Montana, associated with quality cattle and honest dealing. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Elena and Harrison stood on their porch watching the sunrise paint the mountains gold. They were both in their late 30s now, no longer young but far from old. Harrison's hair had started to gray at the temples, and Elena had laugh lines around her eyes, but they were healthy and strong, still very much in love. A new century, Elena mused. Can you imagine what changes it will bring? As long as we face them together, I am not worried, Harrison said, pulling her close. James married Sarah that spring, a beautiful wedding that filled the church in Kelton just as Harrison and Elena's had 16 years before. The young couple moved into the old foreman's cottage, where Harrison and Elena had started their married life. James continued working at the ranch, and Sarah proved herself a capable ranch wife, helping with accounts and managing the household. Catherine graduated from the academy with honors and announced her intention to attend college in California. It was bold and unusual, but Harrison and Elena supported her decision. Their daughter had worked hard and deserved the chance to pursue her dreams. She left in the fall of 1901, promising to write often. The twins followed their own paths. Henry took over the breeding program completely, developing new strains that brought premium prices at market. Thomas went away to veterinary college in Colorado, returning during summers to help on the ranch and gain practical experience. And then, in the spring of 1902, Sarah announced she was pregnant. James was beside himself with excitement, already planning for the child's future. Harrison walked around with a permanent grin, thrilled at the prospect of becoming a grandfather. The baby, a girl named Martha after her great-grandmother, was born in December. Elena held her tiny granddaughter and felt the circle of life complete itself. She thought about her own mother, who had lived to see her grandchildren born. Now Elena was the grandmother, and the legacy of love and family continued. Harrison was a doting grandfather, just as besotted with baby Martha as he had been with his own children. He would hold her for hours, singing the same lullabies he had once sung to James and Catherine and the twins. Elena would watch him and fall in love with him all over again. Time flowed on, bringing changes and challenges and blessings. Catherine graduated from college with a degree in education and returned to Montana to teach at the school Elena had helped establish. She brought with her ideas about progressive education and women's rights, and she quickly became a beloved figure in Kelton. Catherine married at 25, choosing a lawyer from Helena who shared her progressive values. They settled near her family, and Catherine continued teaching while becoming active in the suffrage movement. She gave birth to twins of her own in 1908, a boy and a girl, and Harrison joked about the twins running in the family. Thomas completed his veterinary training and established a practice in Kelton, serving ranchers throughout the region. He married a fellow student he had met at college, a quiet, intelligent woman who shared his passion for animal welfare. They had 3 children in quick succession, keeping Thomas busy both professionally and personally. Henry remained on the ranch, taking over more of the daily operations as Harrison began to slow down. He married late, at 30, to a widow with 2 children of her own. Henry raised her children as his own, and they eventually had 2 more together, expanding the family further. James and Sarah had 3 more children after Martha, 2 boys and another girl. The foreman's cottage grew crowded, and Harrison and Elena helped them build a larger house on a piece of the ranch property. James officially became co-owner of the ranch in 1910, though Harrison remained active in decision-making. By 1912, Harrison and Elena were grandparents many times over. The ranch they had built together was thriving, employing several dozen men and producing some of the finest cattle in Montana. Their children were all settled and successful. Their grandchildren were healthy and happy. Harrison was 50 years old, his hair completely gray now but his body still strong from years of ranch work. Elena was 48. Her beauty matured into something deeper and more enduring than the youthful prettiness of her wedding day. They sat on their porch one evening in late summer, watching the sunset as they had done thousands of times before. The house behind them was full of family, children and grandchildren who had come for Sunday dinner and stayed late, filling the rooms with laughter and conversation. "Did you ever imagine this?" Elena asked, gesturing to encompass the ranch, the house, the family inside. "When you knelt in the snow that night and said, 'Let me carry you,' did you imagine all this?" Harrison thought for a moment. "I imagined loving you," he said slowly. "I imagined building a life with you, having children, growing old together. But the reality is so much richer than anything I could have imagined. You have given me a life beyond my wildest dreams, Elena." "We gave each other that life," Elena corrected. "You carried me through the snow that night, but we have been building this life together every day since." "Together," Harrison agreed, taking her hand. Their fingers laced together, worn now by years of work but still fitting perfectly. Inside, they could hear young Martha, now 9 years old, playing the piano badly but enthusiastically. One of the twins was arguing with a cousin about something incomprehensible. Someone dropped something in the kitchen, followed by laughter. It was chaos, and it was beautiful. And it was exactly what Elena had hoped for all those years ago when she had walked barefoot through the snow to find the man she loved. The years continued to pass, each one bringing its own joys and sorrows. The ranch adapted to changing times, incorporating new technologies while maintaining the traditional values Harrison had established. The family grew as grandchildren became adults and had children of their own. Harrison lived to see his 73rd birthday, surrounded by 3 generations of family. He remained active until the end, still walking the ranch property every day, still offering advice and guidance. He passed away peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1934, Elena lying beside him as she had for almost 50 years. Elena lived another 6 years after Harrison's death. She remained on the ranch, cared for by her children and grandchildren, a matriarch whose word was law and whose wisdom was sought on all important matters. She told stories about the old days, about the wild Montana of her youth, about the desperate walk through the snow and the cowboy who knelt and said, "Let me carry you." When she died in 1940 at the age of 76, the funeral drew people from across the state. She had lived a long, full life, rich with love and purpose. She left behind 4 children, 19 grandchildren, and 32 great-grandchildren, all of them touched by the legacy of love she and Harrison had built. The ranch continued, passed down through the generations. The Thorne name remained synonymous with quality and integrity. And in the family archives, carefully preserved, was the story of how it all began. A desperate woman, a brutal winter storm, a cowboy's act of kindness, and a love that had sustained them through everything life brought their way. The old trapper's cabin still stood on the mountain, maintained by the family as a sort of shrine. Every year, descendants would make a pilgrimage there, standing in the clearing where Elena had stumbled out of the snow and Harrison had knelt to carry her. It was a reminder of where they came from, of the courage and love that had founded their family. In the modern era, long after both Elena and Harrison had passed, their great-great-grandchildren would still tell the story. It had become family legend, embellished perhaps, but true in all its essential details. The story of a woman who walked barefoot through the snow for love, and the man who knelt and said, "Let me carry you," and how that single act of compassion and love had created a legacy that endured for generations. It was a testament to the power of love, to the way 2 people can build something lasting even in the face of hardship and uncertainty. It was a reminder that the choices we make, the kindness we show, the love we give, can echo down through the years, shaping not just our own lives but the lives of countless others yet to come. And in the end, that was the truest measure of their success. Not the ranch they built or the wealth they accumulated, but the family they created and the love they shared. A love that began with a desperate walk through the snow and a cowboy's simple offer to carry her burden, and that grew into something so vast and deep that it could sustain generations. Their story became the foundation upon which an entire family built their lives, a touchstone to return to when times were hard, a reminder that love, when true and deep and unwavering, can overcome any obstacle, survive any hardship, and create something beautiful that lasts long after we are gone. And so the story of Elena and Harrison Thorne lived on, told and retold, a legend and a truth, a romance and a reality, proof that sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones we write with our lives, day by day, year by year, choice by choice, until we have created something so beautiful and enduring that it becomes its own kind of immortality.